Ethan Parker had always considered himself a man of patience. Between raising his 8-year-old daughter alone and juggling 2 jobs just to keep the bills paid, he had developed a tolerance for chaos that most people could never understand, but nothing in his life had prepared him for Victoria Hale. Victoria wasn't just his new boss, she was a storm wrapped in a designer suit, with eyes that could freeze fire and a voice that could cut steel. From the very first day, she seemed to take personal delight in pushing him to his limits. Every instruction came with an unspoken expectation that he would fail, and every mistake, no matter how small, was magnified into a glaring indictment of his worth. Ethan tried to remind himself that she was brilliant, maybe even brilliant beyond measure. She had single-handedly turned around a failing company and built a reputation that made other CEOs quake, but brilliance didn't make it any easier to endure the relentless tension she radiated. That Thursday morning began like every other week. Ethan's alarm had gone off at 5:30 a.m., dragging him out of a restless sleep he hadn't had in days. He barely had time to grab a cup of lukewarm coffee before racing to the office, hoping he could get a head start before Victoria arrived. But as always, she beat him to his desk by 10 minutes, standing there with her arms crossed, a look on her face that could make a grown man question every life choice he'd ever made. "Mr. Parker," she said, voice crisp and cold, "I hope you're ready. Today will require more than your usual effort. I expect precision, focus, and competence." Ethan forced a smile, though his stomach knotted. "Of course, Victoria, I'll do my best." "Your best?" She raised an eyebrow. "Let's hope it's good enough this time." And with that, she turned and walked away, heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving him trembling with a strange mix of irritation and something he couldn't quite name. The day dragged on like a storm cloud, refusing to move. Reports, spreadsheets, and endless emails flooded his desk. Every time Ethan thought he had caught up, a new task appeared, each more complicated and urgent than the last. And all the while, Victoria hovered just out of reach, her presence like a shadow at the edge of his vision, reminding him that any slip could ruin him. By midday, Ethan was exhausted, his concentration fraying. That's when it happened, the first subtle hint that Victoria's icy demeanor might not be the full story. He had just finished organizing a complicated set of quarterly reports when she appeared behind him, unusually quiet. "You've done this better than expected," she said softly, almost hesitant. Her eyes lingered on his work, and for a moment she didn't snap at him, didn't criticize, she just looked. Ethan's chest tightened, a confusing warmth spreading through him. He had been trained to see her approval as a rare gift, something nearly impossible to earn, and yet here it was, given freely. But before he could even process it, Victoria's expression shifted. The faint warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by the familiar sharpness that had made him anxious for weeks. She leaned closer, just slightly, and Ethan could feel the faint brush of her hand as she adjusted the papers on his desk. "You're late on the Henderson file," she whispered, her voice low, almost private. "Don't let this happen again." Ethan nodded quickly, heart pounding, and returned to his work, but something had changed. He couldn't stop thinking about the proximity of her, the way her presence seemed to fill the entire room, and the way his pulse raced whenever she spoke. The afternoon passed in a blur. Meetings collided one after the other, Victoria's sharp gaze always finding him, catching him in moments of distraction. At some point he realized he hadn't eaten, hadn't even thought about his daughter's homework waiting at home. Every instinct in his body was screaming exhaustion, but he couldn't afford to let it show, not to her. Then, as the sky darkened and the city lights began to glow through the office windows, it happened, something that no amount of preparation could have predicted. Ethan was at his desk, finishing a particularly complex report, when Victoria appeared at the edge of his workspace. Her eyes locked on his, and for the first time there was no critique, no judgment, only something raw, intense, and unreadable. Before Ethan could react, she leaned over, her lips brushing his in a kiss so sudden, so impossible, that his mind went completely blank. The sound of the office, computers humming, distant phone rings, the occasional shuffle of feet vanished. Time itself seemed to freeze. Ethan felt his body stiffen, heart hammering in his chest, mind racing with 1,000 questions. Why? What does this mean? Did this really just happen? Victoria pulled back slightly, her forehead resting near his, breath mingling with his. Her eyes searched his face, wide and urgent. She started, then faltered. "I didn't mean..." Ethan couldn't even speak. All he could do was stare, a chaotic storm of confusion and desire raging inside him. He wanted answers, but more than that, he wanted to understand why the woman who had driven him to the brink every single day suddenly kissed him as if nothing else in the world existed. The office door opened behind them, and a colleague's voice called out, breaking the moment. Victoria stepped back instantly, her usual composure returning like a shield. The icy mask was back, but Ethan could still feel the lingering heat of her touch. the memory of the kiss burning in his chest. As she walked away, heels clicking with her familiar authority, Ethan sank into his chair, mind spinning. He had survived her impossible standards for weeks, endured her criticism, and somehow navigated the tension that had made every day a challenge. But now he didn't know how to function. That kiss had thrown everything into chaos. He stared at his computer screen, trying to focus, but the words blurred together. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether to continue working or to chase after her and demand answers. The city outside turned golden as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the office floor, but inside, Ethan's world had narrowed down to one question: why did she kiss me? And just like that, the man who had been able to endure anything life threw at him realized he might not be able to survive this storm. Ethan didn't sleep that night, not really. His mind kept replaying the moment over and over, the brush of her lips, the sharp intake of breath, the way Victoria Hale's eyes had searched his face as if she were looking for something buried deep inside him. He tossed and turned on the narrow couch in his small apartment, glancing at the digital clock every few minutes. 2:17 a.m., 3:04 a.m., 4:12 a.m. The hours crawled past, yet sleep remained a stranger. He should have been focused on his daughter Lily, who was curled up in her bed 2 rooms away. He should have been resting for the next grueling day at the office, but he couldn't. His thoughts were trapped in a whirlwind of confusion, desire, and fear. He kept asking himself the same questions: was it real? Did she mean it? Or was it just some mistake, some fleeting impulse from a woman used to controlling everything in her life? By the time he finally dragged himself out of bed, the sun was peeking over the horizon, casting pale light into his cluttered apartment. He moved through his morning routine like ghost shower, coffee, quick breakfast, all with the same distracted, dazed expression. Lily noticed, of course, and asked, "Daddy, are you okay?" "Yeah, just tired, sweetie," he lied, forcing a smile. Her small, concerned eyes lingered on him, but she accepted the answer without further questioning. Ethan kissed her forehead and promised himself he'd try to focus on her, on the life he had to protect, rather than the chaos Victoria Hale had just unleashed in his mind. The commute to work was no less torturous. Every traffic light felt like an eternity, every honking horn a reminder that the world continued spinning while he wrestled with a storm inside. By the time he arrived at the office, he was already exhausted, yet he couldn't help but steal glances at the elevator doors, half expecting Victoria to step out and confront him again. When he walked into the office, the familiar hum of computers and murmuring coworkers felt almost comforting, but only briefly. His desk sat exactly where it always did, but it now seemed charged with electricity, waiting for the storm to return. And sure enough, Victoria appeared. Impeccably dressed, walking through the office with the confident stride that had always made Ethan feel both awe and irritation. Today, though, something was different. She didn't start with her usual sharp critique or commanding tone. Instead, she lingered near his desk longer than necessary, her gaze landing on him with an intensity that made him shiver. "You look distracted," she said softly, almost as if she were confessing something to herself rather than scolding him. Ethan swallowed hard. I didn't sleep well," he admitted, unsure why the truth slipped out. Victoria's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, a flicker he wasn't used to seeing. Then, as quickly as it appeared, her composure returned. "Do not let it affect your work," she said, voice firm but not biting this time. "We have a lot to do today. I need your focus." Ethan nodded, though he felt the weight of the day pressing down before it even began. Meetings, deadlines, and impossible expectations awaited him, yet he found himself stealing glances at her every time she passed. It wasn't just attraction, it was the puzzle of her. Victoria Hale was an enigma wrapped in authority, and that kiss had shattered every preconception he had about her. By mid-morning, Ethan's nerves were frayed. He was juggling 3 different reports and trying to prepare slides for a presentation Victoria would deliver that afternoon. His phone buzzed. A message from Lily, a simple drawing she had made, captioned, "Daddy, you're my hero." He smiled despite the chaos, but the smile didn't last. Victoria appeared behind him again, leaning over just slightly as she scanned the screen. "You're doing well for now," she murmured, her voice lower than usual. The proximity, the scent of her perfume, the faint warmth radiating from her, it all sent Ethan's heart into a frenzy. Before he could process it, she straightened and said, "I need you after the meeting, it's important. Something only you can handle." Ethan's pulse spiked. He nodded, trying to mask the sudden thrill that ran through him. "Of course, whatever you need." The meeting itself was grueling. Victoria commanded the room with precision and authority, her every word sharp and deliberate. Ethan contributed where necessary, but his mind kept wandering back to her. Every time their eyes met across the table, his chest tightened, and he felt that same inexplicable pull that had started with the kiss. After the meeting, he waited at his desk, the office now quiet as most of the employees had left for the day. He tried to focus on organizing files, checking emails, and reminding himself that he needed to act professional, but it was impossible. He could feel the tension coiling tighter and tighter in his chest, each tick of the clock amplifying it. Then she appeared. Victoria stood at the edge of his desk, arms folded, her usual authority tempered by an unfamiliar hesitation. "Ethan, I need you to come with me," she said, her voice softer than before, almost vulnerable. He hesitated, unsure if he was prepared for whatever this meant. "What is it?" he asked, trying to sound casual, though his stomach knotted with anticipation. "Something urgent," she replied, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "I can't tell anyone else, not yet, it's about tonight." Ethan's curiosity spiked. "Tonight? What's happening tonight?" Victoria's eyes darted away briefly, as if she were weighing whether to trust him with what she was about to reveal. Then she returned her gaze to him, steady and intense. "It's complicated and dangerous. I need you there, Ethan. You might be the only person I can trust." His pulse quickened. Dangerous, trust, why him? A million questions flooded his mind, yet he didn't dare ask them all. He simply nodded. "Follow me," she said, turning toward the deserted corridor that led to the executive wing of the building. Ethan followed, feeling the tension coil tighter with every step. He wasn't just nervous, he was on edge, every nerve in his body alert. Something about the way she moved, the urgency in her step, made him realize that whatever awaited him was serious and possibly life-changing. As they walked, Ethan tried to make sense of his own feelings. Confusion, desire, fear all collided in his chest. That kiss had shattered his understanding of their relationship. She had driven him crazy with her perfectionism, her demands, her icy demeanor, and yet in that one moment she had shattered all his defenses. Why now? Why him? What had changed? Victoria stopped in front of a private conference room, placing a hand on the door handle. "Inside," she said simply. Her voice carried a weight Ethan had never heard before, a mixture of urgency, fear, and something more personal. As he pushed the door open and stepped inside, he had no idea what awaited him. But one thing was certain, tonight everything would change. Ethan followed Victoria down the quiet corridor, his heart hammering in his chest. The office lights reflected off the polished floors, creating long, distorted shadows that seemed to stretch toward them like fingers. Every step he took made his stomach twist, anticipation, fear, and a strange, unnameable longing all tangled together in a chaotic knot. "Victoria, what is this about?" he asked cautiously, keeping his voice low. He didn't want anyone in the building to hear, but more than that, he didn't want to seem unprepared for whatever was coming. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stopped halfway down the hall and turned to face him. Her usual composure wavered just slightly enough for Ethan to notice. "I didn't want to involve you in this," she admitted softly, "but I don't have a choice." Ethan's pulse spiked. "Involve me in what?" Her eyes searched his face, intense and desperate. "Something has come up, something dangerous, and I can't handle it alone." Before he could respond, her phone buzzed sharply in her hand. She glanced at it, her expression darkening instantly. "This changes everything," she muttered, almost to herself. "What is it?" Ethan asked, leaning closer, the tension between them palpable. Victoria didn't answer directly. She gestured toward a small, private office at the end of the corridor. "Inside, you need to see this for yourself. I can't explain over the phone." Ethan's curiosity collided with his fear. Something about her tone, urgent, cautious, serious, set his instincts on edge. He followed her into the office, closing the door behind them. The city lights spilled through the windows, casting long streaks across the polished floor, illuminating the sharp lines of her face and the sudden vulnerability in her eyes. She handed him a thick folder, her hands trembling slightly. I didn't want you to see this, but you're the only person I can trust. If anyone finds out about these documents," she trailed off, her voice barely above a whisper, "it could ruin everything, my career, the company, possibly worse." Ethan's hands shook slightly as he opened the folder. Inside were documents, emails, and reports that revealed a secret so explosive it made his head spin. The company had been under investigation by unknown parties, sensitive information had been leaked, and some group was planning to use it to destroy Victoria and everyone associated with her. "Why are you showing me this?" Ethan asked, disbelief mixed with concern. "Why not just handle it yourself?" Victoria's eyes softened. "Because you're different, I trust you, I can't explain it, but someone I know won't betray me, someone who understands what it means to fight for something you care about." Ethan's mind raced. He had endured difficult jobs before, faced challenges that would have crushed others, but this was something on a whole new level. And yet, despite the danger, despite the fear, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her. The kiss, the moment in the office, the memory lingered, burning in his mind like fire. Before he could ask another question, Victoria stepped closer. Her eyes searched his face with an intensity that made his chest tighten. Ethan, I can't do this without you. I need you by my side. Ethan swallowed hard. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he admitted, his voice barely audible. This isn't just work, this is dangerous. What if something happens to you? Her lips suddenly brushed his again, soft, urgent, desperate. It wasn't the playful, testing kiss from before. This one carried weight, a silent plea. Then we face it together, she whispered. Whatever comes next, I need to know you'll be there. I can't not with you. Ethan's head spun. He had spent weeks trying to navigate her perfectionism, her relentless pressure, and the strange, electric tension that existed between them. And now, standing in a quiet office with the city sprawling behind her, he realized he was on the edge of something he couldn't walk away from. I'm with you, he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Whatever it is, we face it together. Victoria's shoulders relaxed slightly and she handed him a pen. Then help me. We need to secure this information before anyone else sees it. If it falls into the wrong hands, her voice trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Ethan nodded and began helping her organize the documents, the reality of the danger sinking in with every page they reviewed. They were dealing with powerful people, people who wouldn't hesitate to use any means necessary to achieve their goals. It was no longer just a game of business strategy, this was survival. As they worked, Ethan couldn't help but steal glances at Victoria, the woman who had driven him to the brink every day. The woman who had kissed him out of nowhere was now depending on him. The lines between professional and personal blurred with every passing moment, and he realized he was willing to risk everything for her. Then a sudden noise outside the office made them both freeze. It was subtle footsteps, muffled voices, but enough to make their hearts race. Victoria grabbed the folder and shoved it into Ethan's hands. Hide it, she hissed. Don't let anyone see this, not until we know who's involved. Ethan nodded, taking the folder and slipping it into his bag. His hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through his veins. What now? He asked, glancing at her. Victoria took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room as if preparing for battle. Now we wait. But we can't stay here, it's too risky. We need to move somewhere secure, somewhere private. You're coming with me. Ethan's pulse quickened. He wasn't sure what secure meant or how dangerous this situation would become, but one thing was clear, his life had changed in a single day. The kiss, the trust she placed in him, the danger they were now facing together, it was overwhelming. Before he could process it, Victoria leaned closer, her lips brushing his ear. Whatever happens, Ethan, don't let anyone come between us. Not now, not ever. His stomach twisted with anticipation and fear. He nodded silently, feeling the gravity of her words. This wasn't just about work anymore. This was personal. This was about trust, about survival, about something neither of them had expected, but both were powerless to resist. They left the office together, stepping into the dimly lit parking garage. Shadows stretched across the concrete, and the sound of their footsteps echoed ominously. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine, the danger they were facing now as tangible as the brush of Victoria's hand against his. And yet, even in the face of fear, even with danger lurking just beyond the walls, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years, alive. He was alive because of her. He was awake, alert, and ready to fight. Victoria glanced at him, her expression softening just slightly. We don't have much time, she said, and whatever comes next, it's going to change everything. Ethan gripped the folder tighter in his hands. He didn't know what awaited them or what risks they were about to face, but one thing was certain, he wouldn't let her face it alone. As they walked into the night, the city lights reflecting off the wet streets, Ethan realized the truth. Life had just become a dangerous, exhilarating, unpredictable journey, and he was finally ready to follow her wherever it led. The city streets were slick with rain, reflecting the neon lights like shattered glass. Ethan gripped the folder tightly, his knuckles whitening. The contents weren't just dangerous, they were explosive. And Victoria's warning had made it clear, if anyone found this, it wouldn't just ruin her career, it could put her life in jeopardy. They walked in silence for a few blocks, the only sounds the rhythmic patter of rain on the sidewalk and the occasional distant hum of traffic. Ethan's mind raced with 1,000 questions. Who is after her? Why me? Why now? Every instinct screamed that this was bigger than anything he had ever faced. Finally, Victoria turned into a small, nondescript building tucked between two larger offices. Kind of place that could be easily overlooked, the kind of place perfect for secrecy. Ethan followed her inside, his senses on high alert. The smell of old wood and paper filled the air, a stark contrast to the sterile scent of the office they had just left. This will be safe, Victoria said, her voice soft but urgent. For now. She led him up a narrow staircase to a small room with reinforced windows and a single desk. We can't stay here long, but it's enough to figure out our next move. Ethan set the folder down, glancing at her. Victoria, what exactly are we dealing with? She paused, her eyes darkening. Someone is trying to destroy me, not just my reputation. They want everything I've built gone, and they're willing to go to extreme lengths to do it. She took a deep breath. I didn't want to involve you, but I need someone I can trust completely. You've proven yourself already, Ethan, and now I need more than that. I need you. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. The words were heavy, loaded with unspoken meaning. This wasn't just about work. This was about trust, about survival, and something else entirely. He swallowed hard. I'm here, I don't know what's coming, but I'm not leaving you alone. Her eyes softened, a vulnerability showing through that he rarely saw. Thank you, she whispered. Then before he could respond, she did it again. She kissed him, this time slow, urgent, desperate. The kiss carried weight, history, and fear all wrapped into one, and Ethan felt every nerve in his body ignite. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria's eyes searched his, the city lights reflecting off the rain-streaked windows behind her. We have to move quickly, she said. There's no time to waste. Ethan nodded, adrenaline mixing with desire, fear blending with a strange exhilaration. He wasn't sure what lay ahead, but he knew one thing. He couldn't face it alone, and he didn't want to. Victoria pulled out her phone and began making calls, giving instructions in a tone that was authoritative but tinged with urgency. Ethan watched, amazed at the seamless mix of competence and vulnerability. The woman who had driven him crazy, who had challenged him every day, was now relying on him entirely. And he realized with a strange clarity that he would do anything to protect her. Minutes later, they were in a secure vehicle, driving through the rain-soaked streets. Ethan kept glancing at Victoria, who sat silently beside him, her fingers tapping nervously against the folder in his lap. There was an unspoken tension between them, charged with fear and attraction, and it made every second feel like an eternity. Finally, Victoria spoke. They know about the files, she said quietly. I intercepted a message this morning. Someone inside our company is leaking information. We don't know who, but they're moving fast. Ethan's stomach dropped. And they're dangerous. Victoria's eyes met his, unwavering. Yes, and they won't stop for anything. That's why I need you here. I need someone who can think clearly when things get messy. Ethan nodded. Then we'll handle it together. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. This wasn't just a promise, it was a commitment. And in that moment, standing beside her in a storm of uncertainty and danger, Ethan felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just a single dad trying to survive life's hardships anymore. He was part of something bigger, something urgent, something that could change everything. They arrived at a safe house, a modest apartment with reinforced locks and security systems. Victoria immediately began reviewing the files, her focus razor-sharp. Ethan watched, feeling a mix of admiration and fear. This woman, so composed and untouchable in the office, was now vulnerable, reliant on him in ways he hadn't imagined. Hours passed in tense silence, punctuated by occasional discussions about strategy and next steps. Ethan and Victoria worked side by side, their movements synchronized as if they had been doing this together for years. And through it all, the memory of her lips, her touch, the intensity of the kiss that had started it all, lingered between them like electricity in the air. At one point, Victoria looked up from the files, her gaze locking with his. Ethan, I don't just need your help for this. I need you to stay, not just for tonight, not just for the danger. I need you in my life. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Victoria, she leaned closer, cutting him off with another kiss. This one was unrestrained, urgent, and of unspoken promises. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his, breathing heavily. We have to stick together, she whispered, no matter what comes next. Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. No matter what, he echoed. The night stretched on, filled with tense planning, whispered conversations, and stolen glances that spoke louder than words. Danger was real, immediate, and pressing, but so was the connection between them, undeniable and electric. For the first time in years, Ethan felt truly alive. As dawn approached, they finally paused, exhaustion etched into their faces. Victoria looked at him, her eyes soft but resolute. Whatever happens, Ethan, this changes everything, our lives, our hearts, everything. Ethan took her hands in his, holding them tightly. Then we face it together, he said firmly. Not leaving your side, not now, not ever. Victoria smiled, a mix of relief and something deeper shining through. Good, she whispered. Then in a final lingering moment, she kissed him again, slow, tender, and full of the promise that whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them side by side. And in that kiss, Ethan knew the truth. Love could be born in the most unexpected places, amidst chaos and danger, and it could change everything. He wasn't just fighting for her or for himself, he was fighting for the life they could build together, one that neither of them had imagined but both desperately wanted. For the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel like a single dad struggling to survive. He felt like a man standing on the edge of something extraordinary. The danger was real, the stakes were high, but the fire between them burned brighter than any fear. As the first light of morning filtered through the blinds, Ethan and Victoria held each other close, ready to face whatever came next, because one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again.